Hello and welcome to the NTI PodTalk. My name is Dianne Koehler and I'm Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. Join me as I talk to interesting people in the field of health and wellness, food and farming, and anywhere else we find conversations that matter to our community. By listening, you'll learn a little about NTI and a lot about the things and people around you that make a difference for your wellness. Welcome and let's get started. Hello there. Welcome back to another edition of the NTI Pod Talk. My name is Dianne Koehler and I'm Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. And I want to welcome Ayla Barmmer to our Pod Talk today. Ayla is founder and owner of Boston Functional Nutrition, as well as founder of Fullwell, which is a line of supplements that help support overall health for males and females, but really focuses on fertility. And that is what we're going to be talking about today, a really interesting topic around fertility. So first, Ayla, I just really want to thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm equally looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. Well, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with, founding and being the owner of Boston Functional
hmm
Nutrition. Talk about kind of your interest and where you came from and
hmm
why you have a nutrition focused business.
Sure. So I'm Ayla Barmmer. My professional training is as a registered dietitian. I am also a trained herbalist, as well as have gotten years of extensive training in integrative and functional medicine. And really, I spent most of my career in private practice. So my goal throughout my career was really to build a practice that served people not just locally in the Boston area, but even globally, and really did build that with Boston Functional Nutrition, where I started out more generalized as a practice, supporting individuals with a range of backgrounds in a number of different things, and it was great experience. I wound up really specializing in fertility in practice based on the need that I saw in my community. So I started getting referred probably about 15 years ago. Now, I started getting referrals from a local IVF clinic, and they were women, only women at the time, never men. I know we're going to get into
Mm-hmm.
talking about why that is and why that's a problem
Mm-hmm.
today. But these women would come to me, and at the time, there was so little research really being done on the role of nutrition and lifestyle in fertility. The extent of it, or at least the strongest research and what everybody really cited and the fertility clinics knew was the role around weight and fertility. And so when I was referred, these women, they were coming to me after going through various hormone replacement therapies, right? Various different interventions, right? And their body was stressed. They were physically, mentally exhausted, and they were being told to see a dietitian to lose weight before their next upcoming IVF cycle. And I just remember, I'll never forget that first woman that came and was just sitting across from me, and we're talking and I'm like, this cannot be the way that you go into pregnancy. We are approaching this wrong. I almost don't care what the data says right now about that. I'm like, you are about to approach an IVF, cycle. We have got to nourish you. This is about adding resources. This is about, making sure that you're ready for the most nutrient intensive time really of your life, and so to me, that was what really sparked my interest the most to dive into the research around how I could support, these women in my community best with nutrition and lifestyle interventions. How can we set you up for a healthy pregnancy and beyond, not just getting to a positive pregnancy test? And so my work and my specialty in fertility really started there. And there wasn't any other practitioners that I could really learn from at the time that I knew of. There really weren't a lot of people practicing in the area. And so it just was a lot of diving into the research, putting the pieces together and working with the individual that was sitting across from me, and so over time, I built a multi-clinician private practice that was Boston Functional Nutrition. Through that, we saw thousands of individuals, both locally and globally, started working with both women and men. And as the practice evolved, we really began to train other health practitioners. I did a lot of mentoring and supervised practice supervision, all just really rewarding work that I truly enjoyed. And then, from there, the number one dietary supplement that I was recommending in practice, as you can imagine, was a prenatal multivitamin. Being a fertility practice, that was one that I was asked about. IVF clinics were generally just saying, like any OB or PCP, like go find whatever. Didn't have a strong opinion either way. And of course, I really felt strongly about, matching what, an individual's needs were with what the best evidence said. And so for me, the problem I saw and how Fullwell came to be and where I am now is that a lot of the prenatal multivitamins, the forms or doses of nutrients felt like there were compromises taken, that it had a marketer stamp on it. A lot of them just hadn't even evolved, in so many years. I'm like, these are the same things we've been seeing forever, and it's just not right, and beyond that, I also found it really concerning that as a practitioner, I couldn't get information about the quality control process or the testing methodology or the test results, on really key contaminants and potency and allergens from any of these companies that I, wanted to potentially work with. And so that all led to me just being really frustrated. And I often say, I just sort of naively was like, I can do this myself. And so that's what I did. And
Well, that's great.
yeah, and so it wound up taking years to really not only formulate what I wanted, but find a manufacturer that could create products that were up to my standard and tested the way that I needed them to test. And by the time I actually launched Fullwell, the prenatal multivitamin, I was 38 weeks pregnant with my second. It was summer solstice, and I was like in a lawn chair with my
Oh, wow.
laptop just on a website that I built, but I had the best product. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'm not launching a brand, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm putting product out into the world that I know my clients will be able to use while I'm out, and these other practitioners that I had, been training or were part of my network would appreciate. And so that's really how Fullwell came to be. And now, just to kind of wrap this up, I mean, where I am now is I still really enjoy educating other clinicians. I work with Lily Nichols through the Women's Health Nutrition Academy, and we co-founded that. And I primarily spend my time with Fullwell, developing our line, ensuring that we're keeping the integrity and the quality that we had at the start. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listening to your story sort of reminds me how short-sighted, um, and I'm going to say conventional medicine is, such that these women who are going to fertility clinics, IVF fertility clinics, like after they did everything that was unsuccessful, then they got the recommendation to go see a dietitian for weight loss. Like
Yeah.
as if that is, they should have gotten a recommendation before they even started, not necessarily for weight loss, but for to optimize
Hmm.
their body's vitality and their nutrient density and all that kind of stuff, and it was like a last resort, and for such a small, like targeted thing that may have something to do with it, but is not the predominant factor.
Yeah, and I really got the sense that it was the patients themselves, these women that were actually requesting the referral in the first place. Like it didn't
Mm,
even almost occur to, the clinics that would be part of it. And
yeah.
and it's amazing to me because we've come a lot further with the research and we've come a lot further with our understanding around how nutrition and lifestyle impacts fertility. But it just, I mean, even from an intuitive perspective, it's like, of course, what you're
Mhm.
doing preconception and how you're setting yourself up in those months prior to conceiving is critical, right? Because otherwise, I mean, there's for so many reasons. I mean, early pregnancy is very nutrient intensive. You also just don't want to be playing catch up, right?
Mhm.
Once you're pregnant and the resources are being spent,
Yeah.
very hard to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the body really only wants to reproduce when it is in a state of
Hmm.
like, great abundance that it can spare
Yeah.
that intensive use of nutrients to support the growth of a whole new living thing.
Oh yes,
Um,
that is that's something that I always tried to, talk to my clients about who would come in feeling like their body was betraying them. They were failing. They didn't understand what was wrong with them. And, often I would frame it as exactly what it is. Your body's actually doing exactly what it's designed to do.
yeah.
It has to have the right resources and no other priorities, in order to really allow reproduction to happen. And that's by beautiful design. We're trying to procreate during times that are good and plentiful, where the best chances of success are there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so as you say, you started out working with women, and certainly a lot of people think that fertility and and infertility are all based on the woman's um, issues and
Hmm.
insufficiencies, and trying to think of different ways of saying that don't make it sound so sort of degrading, but
No, the
and
burden's really been felt by women.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So um, this causes people to disregard, be dismissive, not even recognize that the male's role in fertility is also
Hmm.
a huge issue. So can you talk about kind of why that is and why people overlook the male's role?
Yeah, I think male infertility is poorly understood for a variety of reasons. So probably one of the biggest underlying drivers is the cultural kind of perception of, the men's role being simply sperm donation, to
Mm-hmm.
say it crudely, like that their role ends at conception and it's this like one moment in time, when in reality that's not at all true. And there's such interesting data that we can discuss, today. But you also see from a very like practical level that historically fertility research and the clinical focus has been overwhelmingly on women.
Mm-hmm.
Again, cultural society factors, fertility has been seen as a women's domain. Male infertility has been heavily stigmatized. I think there's a fear of hurting men's egos that
Mm-hmm.
that we could,
Virility.
yeah, we could absolutely, is honestly ridiculous. I've always felt like, let's give men a chance here, because I do
Mm-hmm.
think that if they knew the level of impact that they played on the health of a pregnancy, on pregnancy complications, on baby's long-term health, then they would step up. At least that's my optimistic viewpoint there. And
Mm-hmm.
I think overall this has all led to underreporting, avoidance of testing, not even considering testing. And then, the extent of the testing is getting a semen analysis, which is not at all a comprehensive way to assess male fertility. It's a starting point, but it's one moment in time that's looking at limited parameters, and not everything that goes into what it takes to be fertile. And just to kind of drive it home with some, statistics, like in terms of how common male fertility
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Male fertility is responsible for about 50% of all, infertility cases, solely responsible for about 20%, and at least a contributing factor in another 30 to 40%. So it's really significant, just as significant, and sometimes more so than women's role. And there's a lot of reasons for that we can really talk about. But I think the fact that half of infertility cases involve male factors, and yet men have largely been neglected in terms of research, diagnosis, and treatment, is really a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm just realizing that My husband and I just watched a movie 2 nights ago. It's an old movie called She's Having a Baby. I don't know if you ever saw this movie with Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth McGovern. It's from the 1980s, like the maybe the late 80s. And it's a comedy, but um it's this couple and it goes through kind of a whole bunch of things, but they finally get to a point in their marriage after 4 years of marriage where they want to have a baby, and it's not happening. And so she goes and gets tested. Of course, this is in the late 80s. So she goes and gets tested, and then she tells him, babe, it's not me, it's you. And they do this kind of cutaway where he's like, it's like this really weird music, and it's him like thinking, oh my God, like what could possibly be wrong with me, and it really is showing how he has this sense that something about his maleness and his virility
Mhm.
is being challenged. But it ended up being that the reason why he wasn't able to impregnate his wife was that he was wearing tight underwear, and the answer was to wear boxers. And
Mhm.
so we're going to talk about the factors that that come into play for male fertility, and perhaps wearing boxers versus tight underwear plays a role because it affects the temperature of the testicles and the sperm and all those kinds of things. But I'm guessing that that's not the only thing. But that's where they landed on in this movie in the late 80s. It was like, all right, if it has anything to do with male issues, it's the underwear. It can't have
Yeah.
anything to do with anything else. But anyway, it's kind of a funny movie, and I didn't even make the connection when we were watching it that you and I were going to be having this conversation today. We just watched it like 2 days ago. So
Oh
anyway,
gosh, in like 40 years later, I'm not sure we've that's actually in some ways it's a little depressing because I don't know how much further we've gotten with the cultural perception, of
yeah,
I mean that was probably progressive for an 80s movie, but it
yeah,
does reflect, I mean what you see in like cultural, art, is like the actual person, how it's like a reflection of what's actually believed, right? But I think
right.
so much of that persists. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, so let's talk about like what kind of things do cause male infertility, and if you want to talk about the underwear choice issue, that's fine too. But I'm guessing that's not the only component.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, it is, yes, there is like a very real risk factor with overheating or restriction of the testes. And that
Hmm.
is like one piece of it. And so,
Hmm.
it's recommended that really anything that's going to, I mean, this is true for men and women, right? It's like we want to make sure that fresh, oxygenated, nutrient-rich blood is circulating between the brain and the reproductive organs and throughout the body.
Yeah.
And so that's important, and that's why exercise can be such a anything that's going to move the circulate promote circulation is going to be really helpful. And then avoiding prolonged overheating exposure, like saunas and hot tubs, and to some extent like cycling and things like that. I think that there's, I've had patients in practice for years that have done all of those things, and we've just kind of like set some parameters around it, right? But there, that's one factor. I would say from the bigger factor, and this is what's impossible to really measure, or at least very difficult to measure in full on a semen analysis, is the effect of oxidative stress or nutrient deficiencies on the health of the sperm. And
Hmm.
so that we know that, in a semen analysis, you can measure, morphology, which is the shape of the sperm. You can measure movement, which is motility, and you can measure count. And you can also measure DNA fragmentation, but you can't measure the more subtle, but very impactful oxidative stress that can happen, and that's where we see the biggest risks to sperm and semen health, right? And so
Mm.
So things that impact that are really anything that's going to impact oxidative stress and cause that, right? Without adequate. So if we think about oxidative stress, right, you've got some of the biggies like smoking,
Mm-hmm.
tobacco
Mm-hmm.
use. You've got, environmental toxins and pollution. You've got work environment exposures depending on the occupation of, the person, we're talking about. And then you've got, so there's the external exposures, and then you've got what you're inputting from the diet's perspective, right? Like to help mitigate that. So antioxidants, omega-3
Mm-hmm.
fatty acids, straight up just B vitamins, right? Like
Right,
all of the
right.
things that the liver and the rest of the body really needs in order to process oxidative stress and neutralize it in the body. And I always say, I mean, the reproductive system is uniquely damaged by oxidative stress because it's kind of again the last thing your body's going to prioritize
Mm-hmm.
over other needs by the body. So if you're under a lot
Mm-hmm.
of oxidative stress, your body's going to prioritize keeping all the essential functions kind of going, right? And where we're not going to, it's not going to spend as much time protecting sperm, protecting egg.
Right,
And
right.
just to kind of bring that point home, sperm are actually very uniquely disturbed by oxidative stress and damage because they can't repair their own membranes, whereas eggs can to some extent.
Oh,
And so, sperm are, once they're damaged, they're damaged. And you've got to kind of cycle through that 3 month cycle for new sperm to be made. So the good news there is that, there's a lot that can be done in a 3 month window, maybe 6 months or a year, ideally, right? To help flood the body with lots of antioxidants and nutrition, nutrients, and try to mitigate, get rid of some of those big environmental exposures. We obviously can't get rid of everything,
mm-hmm.
to help protect, sperm and its integrity and quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that with eggs there is some
Mhm.
capacity to help do self-repair.
There is a little
Um,
bit, and it also can they also can, to a small degree, kind of repair, minor issues with sperm too. So I mean, we're pretty amazing,
I know,
and like eggs
I
really are
know,
in that way.
I know.
But there's an extent, and we're all, female, male, we're all affected by pollution, oxidative stress, the things in our environment, I think. And so it's difficult. So you've got this like cumulative effect, from both sides.
Right.
And yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Real, wow, fascinating. Okay, so you're saying that sperm analysis is probably not the best way to test. Are there other assessments that are available to
hmm
men and couples?
I think it's a good tool. A semen analysis is a good tool to use, but as long as you keep in mind that it's not like you get a semen analysis once and it's like pass or fail, the male is contributing to this or not. Like no matter what the semen analysis says, men are contributing, and what
Right.
their preconception health looks like, diet and lifestyle wise, is profoundly impacting the health of the pregnancy
Mm-hmm.
and baby's long-term health. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing to keep in mind. Is too often in practice what I've seen, and still see, is that men are just absolved of any
Yeah.
responsibility,
Right.
once they've done one semen analysis. And like I said, it can't pick up on everything. And so for me,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a couple ways you can go. I mean, on the one hand, there's low-hanging fruit, very well researched, really solid ways that you can just support reproductive health in men. So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking a focus on lots of produce, variety of it, enough good protein and those essential fatty acids, very important to the integrity of the membrane of sperm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I would start, is like this balancing of the diet, adding in lots more antioxidants, and essential fatty acids. And then, but if you want to tailor it further, or even frankly, to get a little bit more buy-in from your clients, that's where I do think
Mm-hmm.
like some testing can help. And I think,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have definitely done, comprehensive vitamin and mineral assessments, to show where the
Yeah.
specific gaps are. I sometimes will do an omega-3 index. There's times where I absolutely will look at a comprehensive stool analysis to ensure that digestion and absorption is optimized, right, for all the good
Mm-hmm.
stuff that we're
Mm-hmm.
adding
Mm-hmm.
and putting in the mix,
Mm-hmm.
and also that that's not a source of oxidative stress, right? So the way that I think about it is, let's fill the bathtub, but ensure that the drain isn't open, So
Right.
let's kind of
Yeah.
look and
Yeah.
see if, while we're adding all the right stuff, let's look and see if there's any major sources of
Mm-hmm.
oxidative stress that are really stressing the body,
Mm-hmm.
and plug them or,
Mm-hmm.
remove them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the approach I take. So if you've got someone on a budget, or timeline is a challenge, which it often is with fertility, I might not do all the testing,
Right.
you can
Right.
really rely on those strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's nothing else to directly sort of do any other kind of direct diagnostic imaging assessment of sperm in particular. It's sort of proxy things like what's your overall level of nutrients, what's your
Mhm.
gut health, what's your oxidative stress, markers, those kinds of things.
Yeah, with the
And that
exception,
makes sense.
I'd say the one exception, well, maybe looking to see if there's something like a varicocele or infection. I've had very few cases like that over the years, but where things just didn't make sense. I actually had I had a couple where they were actually using the varicocele as a form of birth control, and didn't really understand that the varicocele in itself was not a normal thing to have for him, and was causing
Right.
stress on the body. And so there
Right.
are things like that. And that's where, collaborating with, a urologist,
Mm-hmm.
a reproductive endocrinologist, and making sure, kind of advocating, for your patients to really ask for these things, or at least, or trying to coordinate with some of those providers to do that, to rule out the big stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
then if there's a varicocele, if there's an infection, right, like all the good nutrients in the world are not going to solve that issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about fertility and preconception and then fertility. What about, are there any influences of male sort of health that, you know, can play roles in fertility, but more broadly are playing any roles in like pregnancy complications or
hmm
health of, the neonate, the baby? What kind of things should we be thinking about there?
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting and emerging research here, linking men's preconception health, and what they're doing preconception to pregnancy complications by way of the placenta development. So men actually, through various signals, really epigenetic signals, are affecting the way the placenta develops, and
Mm,
ultimately the health of it. And that's something that I just don't see talked about enough. And I find it so mind-blowing and really, really
mm-hmm,
interesting.
mm-hmm,
I mean, obviously, women are growing this entirely new organ, the placenta, during pregnancy, and it's really thought to be related to the status of the female's health. But really, we find that men have in some cases, a more significant role over the development and health of the placenta than women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the health of the placenta really traces to so many other things. So you do see preterm birth being related to men's preconception health, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes. Those are
Wow.
pregnancy. This is why I really feel that men's preconception health is actually a women's health issue, a women and babies health issue in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, and
Yeah.
why we've got
Wow.
to think about it more seriously. Um, But beyond that, you see things like men over the age of 50, if they are, I see it's like men can conceive at any age and all that. But no, actually, after age 45 and definitely after age 50, there is a risk. And some of those include a higher risk of autism in the offspring. What you're really seeing is more oxidative stress, more DNA
Mm-hmm.
damage, more fragmentation. I mean, sperm DNA damage to give just a little bit more, numbers around it. If there's sperm DNA damage, it can double the miscarriage rate. And it may not be something that is picked up on a semen analysis. So
Mm-hmm.
I really think that women are living with the burden of pregnancy loss and feeling the guilt and responsibility for that, when in reality, it really may be just a number of different changes that men need to make, in the
Mm-hmm.
preconception period. Now, that's not always true across the board. It is
Mm-hmm.
multifactorial. There is so much that is not in our control. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to make it seem like that's the case, but there are things that we could be doing that we're not, to reduce risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I definitely don't want to get too technical, but I'm finding this to be fascinating. Can you explain, um, if there is a simple way to do it, how does the male's influence, how does that affect the placenta?
Yeah,
Is there an easy way to explain that?
I think the easiest way to really explain it is that it's via signaling. I mean, there's actually some interesting ways that within semen, there are signals that are sent to the female reproductive organs to be more prepared for implantation, to kind of start the process, right? Like it actually
Uh-huh.
changes the environment of female reproductive
Wow.
organs.
Wow.
And that's pretty crazy to think about. And so, and through some of those signals, and it's more of an epigenetic route that does it with
Mm-hmm.
the role in the placenta development. That's kind of where it starts. It's like the initial signal that starts the process of the placental development, that's happening via the male um the male semen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a very complex multi-step process.
Sure, yeah.
uh, but the way that's initiated is from the quality, the integrity, and the signaling, right, of the semen. And so
Oh,
that's
that's
where, and it's
interesting.
not fully understood,
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I think, yet either. And I would love to see, more research, but I think, yeah, that connection alone is
Mm-hmm.
huge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some
Yeah,
things
that's
I didn't
interesting.
mention too is that even just a low sperm count. Yes, maybe you can get to a pregnancy via IVF or even naturally, but there's other implications of having things like a low sperm count, like increased risk of metabolic syndrome in baby, greater body fat, higher blood pressure, insulin resistance, dyslipidemia. We see that all being statistically significantly more prevalent when there's low sperm count. Or just overall sperm quality and quantity are directly linked. And this was in Human Reproduction in 2019, I believe, directly linked to morbidity and mortality and predictive of men's overall health. So it's not only an issue for the pregnancy complications, and babies' long-term health, but we're just thinking even about men's quality of life too, with their
Right,
health.
yeah,
I
long
mean,
term, yeah.
this is where, and I know you had Lisa,
Yeah,
on author of the fifth vital, or the sixth vital. Oh my gosh, I'm not saying this correct, for the
I think
fifth
it was the
vital sign,
fifth,
right?
yeah.
Yep, the
Fifth,
fifth.
yeah.
I'm adding vital signs here.
Yeah.
Um,
We could just add a couple more.
yeah, I don't know, but she's really been so key in getting that message forth, that the menstrual cycle, but I would even go further and just say fertility as a whole is really
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reflective of overall health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Y y uh That's very interesting. And the other thing, and not necessarily having to do directly with the sperm's ability to fertilize an egg, but for the male to be able to even engage in intercourse, which is,
Hmm.
erectile dysfunction. A lot of people don't realize that erectile dysfunction could be a sign of, atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease,
Hmm.
metabolic syndrome. So it all comes together, but it gets whittled down to just, can you get an erection and can your
Hmm.
sperm get to the egg and fertilize that egg? And it is so much bigger than that. And I think that a lot of people don't know that. They don't realize these seemingly short-term um, uh, issues are actually signs of much bigger problems.
Yeah, I think this is just so fertility is such a good example of the problem with the way we approach health in general, or the limitations, I should say. We're really good at intervening on single individual issues or intervening when things become acute and are presenting either a real risk or inconvenience or whatever it is, right? They're bubbling up into a symptom. But where we really miss an opportunity is by not rewinding the clock and thinking if we really want to influence long-term health in humans, that preconception period is the most critical window.
Mhm.
It's amazing how much can be prevented, influenced, supported by focusing on nutrition, lifestyle, and optimizing health we're talking like 3, 6 months, depending on how much is going on, maybe a little longer, right? Before conceiving. I mean, it gets me so excited because it's just if that's the message that I really want to get out, into the world is that like that window, if we want to really address chronic disease
Yeah.
and support the human health, then we need to be focusing on that window of time.
Yeah, and as you said, it's not just for the two partners, the male and the female that are trying to conceive. It's also for the baby and their
Yes.
long-term health
Yes.
as they mature and become an adult.
Yeah, we are talking
And
about generational health here.
yeah,
It's what is done in that preconception window will affect generations, and that's by design. That's how we evolve.
absolutely.
We're always looking for inputs from our environment, whether that's what we eat and what we do or what we can't control, right? That we're coming in contact with, to influence how a baby is going to develop and ultimately live in that world that we were exposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like the very, very big conversations here, but the whole purpose of evolution and these evolutionary um, triggers and stimuli that influence conception and the health of the next generation and all that kind of stuff are so that the next generation can survive. And, it's
Hmm.
all about survivability. And we have so many artificial um, sort of props now that keep things looking healthy and keep people and whatever looking like it's doing a good job of supporting for optimization and survival, but conception and fertility is really the one place where you start to see that breakdown and kind of get a lens to part the curtains of the artificial props that
Hmm.
people don't realize that they actually have some compromises in their health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would argue too that regardless of your desire to procreate, right? Like, so maybe you don't even want kids, or that's not part of the plan, right? Your fertility still matters. Your
Yeah.
reproductive health still matters. It's a window, it's a reflection of what is going on in your body. I mean, you're gonna see
Absolutely.
if your hormones are out of whack, if you're seeing lots of symptoms or dysfunction that's related to kind of the endocrine system, then first of all, you can kind of guarantee there's something going on metabolically too. But,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it really is a reflection that there's something else deeper going on. Like that's a symptom that's bubbling up from something deeper. And that's where I do love more of a functional medicine approach to getting to underlying root causes of,
mm-hmm,
where are those fundamental imbalances? And, oxidative stress is really one of the big ones. Nutrient
mm-hmm,
deficiencies, oxidative stress. Yeah.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is so fascinating. Remind me once again of the educational program that you do, because that is something that, we have so many students and graduates that come through NTI who fertility and conception and prenatal health, and it is something that they want to focus on. And
Hmm.
I think that once participating in our curriculum and going through our educational path, your educational program would be a great add-on and
Yeah.
advanced training to pursue afterwards. So talk about that a little bit more one more time.
Yeah, so Lily Nichols, who some of the listeners may be familiar with her work
Yeah, and we've had her on as
oh,
well.
great,
We
good.
had Lily and
Yeah, so
Lisa.
she's
Yeah.
fantastic. She's a good friend and colleague, and her and I founded the Women's Health Nutrition Academy. It's WHNacademy.com back in 2018, and we intentionally made, I mean, we probably put 100+ hours into each of these webinars, but we intentionally made each one 90 minutes, $75. We run a sale once a year, but the ability to just, we have practitioners in mind, like how are you're going to spend 90 minutes with us and we're going to talk about, okay, here's the background information, but it's not just theoretical and academic. Like here's how this plays out in practice, lots of case studies and practical tips and protocols and that kind of thing. And so I think that it was the resource that we didn't have that we really wanted and we really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one resource. I will say that may or may not be around forever. So I probably would
Mm-hmm.
check it out if you're interested in it. But
Yeah,
those are
sooner
all
than
on
later.
demand. Yeah, and then the other thing I'll mention too, if Lily didn't, because I think she does a really good job with it, is she's got her Institute for Prenatal Nutrition. It's a bigger investment, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
much more small cohort mentoring experience where you get trained as a prenatal nutrition practitioner. And there's no one else that I would really trust getting that level of training from than her. So I think that's another great option if you're interested in getting into, this line of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've established here today, it is so important not just for conception, for getting pregnant at this one moment in time. It is so important for overall health and wellness. Well, this has been fascinating. Is there anything else you want to talk about that I didn't prompt you to talk about? Anything you want to get out
Um,
there?
I would just say, I know we didn't talk a lot about specific nutrients and vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, things like that. I
Yeah.
will say that, through Fullwell, just being a practitioner turned, who's behind, Fullwell, we take the approach of education and kind of community with our health practitioner ambassadors, very seriously. And we have clinical kind of science briefs, clinical pearls, overviews of research, various protocols, all kinds of good stuff, including on men's fertility as part of that community. So if anyone's interested, that's something that we do have. And checking out Fullwell and our formulas, including the men's formulas, I think I'd encourage, but we're
Hmm.
there and love to hear from practitioners with questions and things too. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you're right. We didn't talk about specific nutrients, but I think that, you mentioned B vitamins and things that
Hmm.
are beneficial for oxidative stress. So, like vitamin C, vitamin E, carotenoids, polyphenols, all those kinds of
Yep.
things, which you mentioned, having a diet that's really rich in produce. I mean, we talk about here, predominantly vegetables, not
Hmm.
all fruit, predominantly vegetables, but lots of produce for those antioxidant compounds. Um, And then, of course, vitamin A and zinc are so important for sperm health, and
Yeah,
testosterone,
yep. Zinc and
levels.
selenium are some pretty powerful,
Yeah,
well-researched ones. Carnitine, omega-3 fatty acids, and then CoQ10,
right.
as
Sure.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm sure your products all have all of those things in them. Uh, Speaking of products, your products are not only for fertility though, they're general, like, right?
For everyday health as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
my philosophy is not the big flashy, sexy kind of philosophy around nutrition, but it's that, it starts with, which I think listeners could appreciate. It really starts with a foundation of nutrition. I think that we
Hmm.
make things far too complicated before we've met all of our vitamin, mineral, and
Kind of the
essential
basic.
fats, the acids. Yeah. And it almost acts like a windshield wiper. It's like, start there, plug the holes, fill the gaps. Let's get optimal levels of nutrients
Hmm.
in the mix,
Hmm.
and then see what's left to kind of go in with. So I formulate really comprehensive multivitamins and the very best low oxidation, wild caught sustainable fish oils. As to me, that's your base, a multi in the
Hmm.
fish oil base foundation. And then on top of
Hmm.
that, and that's long term, so we've got options that are really specific to the perinatal journey, fertility and perinatal journey, and then ones that are meant to carry you long term to support your reproductive health at really any stage of life.
Hmm. Great. Nice. Sounds great. Well, talk about how people can find you and your products and your business.
Yeah. Well, you can find Fullwell at Fullwell Fertility on social. FullwellFertility.com is our site. Again, I mentioned WHNA, that's WHNacademy.com. And then I spend a little time on Instagram at Ayla Barmmer, but you'll find a link in my profile to my Substack, which that's where I get the most excited because I can really get into the nuance, around different
Hmm.
topics. And I
Hmm.
spend a lot of time on those articles. And so if you're interested in everything around this fertility conversation and how it plays into culture and politics and all the rest, right? I talk about that a lot on my Substack.
Oh, great. And what about, so Boston Functional Nutrition,
Mhm.
that's something you're still involved in or not,
So
or?
yes, that practice, I have a few clients that I see, but mostly I'm on sabbatical as I focus on some of these other projects. And
Sure.
but it is still there. We're just not actively taking clients right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, great. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm so glad that we got the chance to connect with one another. Um, and I hope our community checks you out. I hope that our community of students and graduates in particular, those who are interested in fertility and conception, check out the educational opportunities because we're always lifetime learners and lifelong
Mhm.
learners. Anytime you engage in some sort of educational path, it always prompts you to want to do more. So I hope they check that out as well. So thank you very
Okay.
much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Dianne Koehler here again. If you found this conversation interesting and haven't already become a student at NTI, check us out at ntischool.com. We hope to see you soon.